No, Secretary Mnuchin will continue to lead the negotiations. He's done an outstanding job. He and I talk probably on not only a daily basis, but sometimes an hourly basis. We've been working very closely with our congressional colleagues, both in the House and the Senate. I fully expect that he will lead the charge coming up in probably the second or third week of July as we try to address what the real needs are. You know, everybody looks at this as the last train leaving the station, so they want to attach some of those special interest needs to that. But this will be all about the American worker, and Secretary Mnuchin will lead the way.
It sounds like Americans should likely expect another stimulus check.
I think the president's been very clear that he's supportive of another stimulus check, and yet at the same time we want to make sure that we're addressing things in a real systemic way, whether that is making sure that the take-home check for every American is greater with a payroll tax deduction, whether it's making sure that we provide incentives for American manufacturing to be brought back from abroad. Those are two critical components the president has asked us to address, and we will be addressing in the coming days.
And when I say payroll tax cut, is that still a deal breaker for the president?
I don't know that there's any red lines right now. He's been very, very strong on making sure that we have payroll tax deductions. The liability protection, I think, is critical for all businesses when we look at this. This new coronavirus and how we deal with it is something that we're all having to come to grips with, but it shouldn't be coming to grips with it just to make trial lawyers rich.
Just wanted to clarify.
Sure.
You said in the interview a minute ago. Did people who were at the rally in Tulsa actually come down with coronavirus and get sick?
I'm not aware of anything that's happened. I know that we had a few people on our advanced team that came down with it, but I'm not aware of anything that came from the Tulsa rally. So thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, so they tested positive, but not necessarily got sick.
Again, those are personal things, and so I wouldn't have any visibility into that. Most of what I've known are asymptomatic folks, but I wouldn't have visibility into that.
Mark, the president said that 99% of coronavirus cases are totally harmless. Public health experts disagree. Why does the president keep?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure which public health experts that you're talking about. I probably get to review more numbers, and when you look at the facts, when you look at really what we're dealing with, a lot of these cases are asymptomatic. Additionally, when we look at a population of over 325 million people, and what we're looking at, those statistics would indicate about 102%. You know, when that 99% came, it came from actual numbers, and you can look at numbers a number of different ways. Hold on, let me finish the question. You know, you ask the questions, I'll try to answer them. All right, and so as we look at that, probably the biggest thing that I'm looking at is how do we track and make sure that those are protected. And if you look at the vast majority of those from 65 years of age and younger, if they don't have a comorbidity, we're looking at this as not as dangerous as a number of other things that could potentially cause a loss of life, and that's the real key is when you start to take out some of the deaths we've had in nursing homes and those. It's not to downplay the deaths that we've had, but it's really to look statistically to know that whatever risk that you may have or I may have or my children or my grandchildren may have, let's look at that appropriately, and I think that's what he was trying to do.
So just for clarity though, he said 99% of the cases where people test positive are totally harmless. You would agree that if you don't die, it may not necessarily still not be harmful?
Well, listen, anytime anybody is sick, we look at that, and we can have a narrative that would downplay the significance of any loved one being sick or a loss of life. I can tell you as a dad and as a parent, anytime my kid even comes down with a sniffle, I'm concerned. So I don't think it was the president's intent to downplay that as much as saying, let's look at the risk and let's look at this in an appropriate way based on facts and figures.
Mark, you mentioned some executive orders that are coming down.
Yeah.
What are you guys looking to achieve with some of those executive orders?
You know, obviously, I'm going to let the executive orders speak for themselves, but I can tell you that we've been working over the last few weeks to make sure that when Congress leaves to go home, because it's apparent that they're not willing to stay here and get the people's work done. In fact, they're disappearing for almost 3 weeks. I don't know that in this particular environment that you can just stand by and say we can just take a 3-week vacation. Most Americans don't get that, and so for us, it's dealing with a number of executive orders that may go all the way from dealing with some of the immigration issues that we have before us, to some of the manufacturing and jobs issues that are before us, and ultimately dealing with China and what we need to do there in terms of resetting that balance.
We have
All
one
right.
last month. I think
Yeah.
you want to be on the
Yeah.
record.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you about Russia. Has the president made any decision whether or not to take any sort of action against Russia for the alleged Afghanistan?
Well, hey, listen, there's no one that has looked at more of the intel than I have, and I would say that my Democrat colleagues in the House and Senate who are foeing this unbelievable concern, where were they when the president took out Soleimani? Here's my concern is you have what would suggest unbelievable intel in the New York Times, and yet it was not actually substantiated. And I can tell you that if my Democrat colleagues would take more time reading their intel briefings and less time reading the New York Times, perhaps they would look at this in the appropriate manner. But I can say this: when this president acted quickly and decisively to take out Soleimani, where there was proof that he had taken out over 600 American soldiers, there is no doubt in my mind that the Democrats on Capitol Hill, they were crying foul all day long, and yet we had proof. And here we have a New York Times article that's unsubstantiated. In fact, if anybody has been in those briefings and they're being intellectually honest, we will know that indeed that if this president is called to act, not only has he acted in the past, but he'll act again if it's actionable intelligence. If it's actionable intelligence, which it is not, if it's actionable intelligence, he will take. Let me be clear. I'll speak directly to the fighting American men and women. We have your back. If people are coming after you, whether it's Russia or anybody else, we have your back. We will defend you. This president has made it clear. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.